self-help love story. And guys, there's so many new exciting things coming out. I talked about it in the beginning of the year about technology and some of the new things you're going to be seeing. There's going to be so many new technologies that you're going to be amazed. In my practice at home, I've been offering these new products. This is a new infrared wrist wrap that I have, and I'll tell you what, if you have issues with the infrared, is really the future of medicine. But this is one of the things that we're offering. I just placed an order for a full wraparound far infrared, and it's far infrared and near infrared, which is double frequency. And so this thing is not only good for the surface, it's good for penetrating. Those of you who know me know that I've been bone on bone and was approved for knee replacement 2 years ago in February. I'm walking without a cane. I'm walking with almost no limp at all. I believe in this stuff and I use it, and I'm seeing results on my friends and family. One more thing I want to share with you. You guys know I love to read a lot of books, and this is such an interesting thing. I bought this book. It's a medical reference. It's the People's Medical Advisor from 1909. 1909. You know what I didn't find in here? Cancer. The word cancer is not even in the book. I really, really highly recommend when you go to the grocery store that you start looking at the labels of every dang piece of food you eat. Because I'll tell you, the bioengineered food they're putting in, the new product that they're putting on apples, there's so many things that they're putting in your food. I walk down the aisle and I scratch my head, and I'm afraid to eat the food anymore because I know that they're literally and intentionally poisoning me. I know that now. I'm convinced of it. But call me a conspiracy theorist, but that's really what I see, and the evidence bears it out. In 1909, cancer wasn't even in medical journals. But yet today, it's the #1 killer. It's one of the #1 killers of men, women, and children. And it's getting higher, especially colon cancer in people under 40. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and get started. So you know my motto, my slogan here is, everyone is looking for a hero. And if you can't find one, be one. And today I'm going to be talking to a hero, man, Mario Acevedo.
Oh, hi.
Mario, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, my pleasure. I would definitely not call myself a hero in any regard, no. But thank you very much for having me on your show. It's a pleasure. I enjoyed your comments.
Well, thank you.
As something says, a conspiracy theorist is somebody who reads the headlines 6 months ahead of time.
Yeah, scary. Yeah, but it's really scary, but true. And I've been doing a lot of research and doing a lot of identifying. I mean, my wife and I went through the grocery store. Well, we do it all the time now, and we just almost do it for fun now. And I could start at the potato chip aisle, and I could go from one end to the other end of that aisle, and I cannot find one item, not one product without bioengineered food ingredients. Not one. And that's another show.
Right, yeah.
So today we have some really, really exciting things. Mario, I never knew that you were a best-selling author. I never knew you had so many works, and forgive me for not having you on the show sooner.
That's okay. Yes, my first 2 published novels were both national bestsellers. So that was a good way to start my professional writing career. And since I've written 8 under my name, and then I was a ghostwriter for a while. So I have some are co-authored, some are not, and I've had I lost track of how many short stories I've had published.
Wow. So we definitely got to schedule you for another show. Yeah, man, again, and I have to disagree with Mario because he is a hero. You guys know I talk about Calma almost every week on my show, Colorado Alliance for Latino Mentors and Authors. And I am very, very humbled to have Mario here because all of the work he's done and does behind the scenes with Calma really is one of the things that makes it work so well and so efficiently. I'm going to talk more about your books, but I want to make sure that we do talk about this. This is really the main topic of why we're here right now, because this is the anthology, The Best of Calma, Colorado Alliance for Latino Mentors and Authors, Ramas y Raíces. And what is ramas?
Branches, and raíces is roots. So
Roots.
Branches and roots. And I guess to encapsulate the theme of what the anthology is about, a lot of the members in Calma feel that, Latino, particularly, Chicanos or Mexican Americans, the ones who predominantly the Latinos living here, were never really given their due as the contributors to literary works or the literary field in America, in the United States. We were always kind of treated as an aside if we were ever regarded at all. Ricardo Lafore,
oh, yeah, absolutely.
The Chicano poets, activists and poets. Just one example of that. So this work was is our attempt. Okay, I mean it gets published January 29th is what we call in the publishing business the laydown date, which is when it becomes available to anyone to order it, so what we wanted to do was to get in Calma have an opportunity because we are authors, meaning writers, it was an opportunity for us to share with the world our works. And in it, if I may, here we had to have our instead of a dedication, I decided to have a quote, and I love quotes, and I'm always getting quotes. And the quote that I included here on the frontispiece of the book is "Quisieron enterrarnos, pero no sabían que éramos semilla," dicho mexicano, which means they wanted to bury us, but they did not realize we were seed. So from that, the roots grew, and then the branches grew, and then we have ramas and raíces.
Oh man, beautiful! That is wonderful. Raíces. Calma meets at a lounge called Raíces, and that is roots. And understanding our roots is so critical because, when you look at a fruit tree, that fruit tree knows that it's a peach tree from the top to the bottom, and it's not just what you see above the ground, it's everything below. And so when you look at this book, you're looking at the roots of many, many contributors, and it's a wonderful thing. Guys, I want to put this plug in before I forget about Calma. You rarely get to be in the presence of successful authors in your lifetime. I mean, it's not something you do on a common, daily basis. But when you get involved in Calma, you are affiliated with best-selling authors. I mean, I'm talking about, you've seen all the guests I've had on my show. You get to be associated with people who write everything from fantasy to historical fiction to real stories about immigration, to stories about immigration law, the history of Colorado. So many wonderful historians and authors and contributors, all in this book. But when you come to a Calma meeting, you see them face to face. I am not exaggerating. When I leave a Calma meeting, I'm almost shaking because I'm so humbled to be in the presence of such brilliant minds. I don't know if you feel like that when you go to Calma, but it's just really special to me.
Yes, I'm very impressed by the depth of experience that they bring, their own perspectives to what they have, both from that of recent immigrants and there are some stories here, and I don't want to start picking on one because people will think that I'm playing favorites. But there's a couple of stories here about the immigrant experience, about digging potatoes, and you read that story and you will never ever look at a potato again, because realizing the work that has to be done, families getting up at the break of dawn and harvesting potatoes, and the story was very, very well told. And let me find it here. I want to get it correct here. By Maria Ramirez, the early season potatoes, and then she also wrote another story about the interpreter, about her having to interpret between her father and the landowners as to how much money, what was going to be the contract to get to harvest the crops from that. So you can really see how much is involved in this. So they have so many stories here. I can't forget that we have not only the essays, and we have a lot of poetry, but we also have works of fiction. And for example, Kimberly Sanchez kind of really has a different take on it in that she projects into the future, and the story is a science fiction. And a Latina way in the future in the science fiction story. And then there's also a romance element in it. So there's a lot of romance because I think romance and love are very powerful themes in Latino literature. For example, Pablo Neruda, right? A lot of his poems, and nobody's going to dismiss his poems as being frivolous or anything. So in keeping with that, I mean, he was an inspiration for many of our contributors. So in keeping with that, our contributors, like our poets, for example, will take a look at his work and then kind of use him as a stepping stone for their own works and for their interpretations or their perspectives on life and love and romance.
Wow. Yeah, I have been so excited about this just because like I said, I've had many of these authors on the show, and so I go through and I look at you mentioned Kimberly Sanchez, Amor Eterno, in her book. There's just been so many. There's names that I don't know. Ernest Hogan, Marisa Aguayo. Oh, Jose Aguayo. Okay.
Well, Ernest Hogan wrote the foreword. He was invited, and he lives in Arizona. So he of course puts his own spin on what he read in the anthology, because I sent him the anthology to read, and then he wrote a foreword. So then he also brings his own experience.
Wow, cool.
As a Latino, basically as a mixed race Latino, and some of the things that he went through. I'm reading I just finished a book by Harrison Candelaria Fletcher, who talks a lot about some of those same themes. In that case, that there's like this purity test that Latinos often give one another, right? and they talk a lot about that, and that, well, you don't look Latino because you're very light skinned, for example, and green eyes, or you can be darker skinned with curly hair, so you're not really Latino, you're Negro, right? So those things come
or you don't speak Spanish,
or you don't speak Spanish, you don't speak the right Spanish, or those kinds of things, and some of that is touched upon in our book as well. But it's not done as a means to divide each other. It's to recognize that there are these differences that we have, and then what unites us underneath those differences. And the fact that we have these differences is really what makes us a stronger community. So if I may, could talk a little bit about how the anthology
yes,
came about.
Please, let's talk about that.
So I was invited to join Calma by Manuel Ramos, who is probably the king of Chicano noir.
Yes.
And he's a local author, very...
Colorado Authors Hall of Fame.
You're right, Colorado Authors Hall of Fame, successful commercial fiction writer. Of course, he will always push back. I think all of us writers, unless we're swimming in money, will push back on what does it mean success, is because success, it just means there's another rung in front of you, right?
That's right.
And what you don't want to do is rest on your laurels, and because there's always more work. There's always more work to be done. So what happened? He invited me to join Calma, and he said, "Well, Mario, you have a different experience in writing, more from the commercial side rather than the literary side." And I think Calma could use you. So I joined, and unfortunately the pandemic set in, right? So we were pretty much meeting online in Zooms, and I remember this one particular time we were meeting, and there were all the little boxes. Remember that, how we all met on these little boxes on the computer screen?
Oh yeah.
And it's almost like the Brady Bunch, remember? So we were talking about moving forward with Calma. It had been around, I think, for at least 1 or 2 years. And now they wanted to expand, and as a result, they had certain objectives they wanted to have. One of them was to be a nonprofit, gain nonprofit status, which they had done, and also, how can they reach out to the community? Another one was, well, how can we talk about ourselves? What can we do to project or to share with the world what we as Calma are? And then the theme came up, or rather, the subject came up about an anthology. So they started kicking around anthologies. And me, at this point, I had already done 2 anthologies. I was the head editor of 2 anthologies. So I started saying, well, you got to think about this, you got to think about that. So then Ricardo Lafora, he looks at me and he says, well, Mario, you seem to know what you're doing. You're in charge of the anthology now.
And I remember, you can't say no.
Well, yeah, and then at the bottom right corner, I remember Manuel Ramos looking at me and shaking his head like, yeah, you walked right into that one. So I said, okay, so I started to put together an action plan. Well, I did put together an action plan. And one of the things that I knew I'd have to do was get a committee. You know, can't do anything without a committee, right? So I got a committee of editors with me, and I needed this because this anthology is really not about me. I, as the jefe editor, el caudillo, right, if you want, of the anthology, I'm responsible for putting it together. But what I don't want is to be a work that represents what I think or what represents my perspective on things.
Right,
okay?
right.
And also, I am definitely not a poet, and I knew we were going to get a lot of poetry submitted. And then the essays part, I thought, well, I am not an essayist, so we need somebody to look at that nonfiction. And then as far as the fiction, we also needed a fiction editor because again, I want people to, I don't want it to be an example of what I think fiction should be. Mm-hmm. So I got my editorial committee together. So then we started to get a plan, and one of them was a submission. And I also started to look at, okay, looking forward down the line, the production of the anthology in terms of the editing process, the what we call the content editing, and then the copy editing, and then the formatting, putting it together, compiling it into the content of it, you know, the actual anthology, the different submitted works. And then how do you package it? In other words, the cover and all that. So we're going to need some designers on that. Well, the thing is, with big surprise, you know, we get a bunch of Mexicanos together and they start to do something and quickly realize they have no money, right? Mm-hmm. So then we kind of got a hard stop because I didn't want to move forward on it because what I really wanted was Ramos and Raíces to be a professional product, if you will, okay? I didn't want it to be at all amateurish, mm-hmm. which meant that we were going to have to spend some money, and we had zero budget. So the original publication date was last September, when I initially planned this out. But I planned that out thinking that we were going to get some financial support and maybe some other kind of support from outside. You know, somebody would know somebody to step forward and volunteer to do pro bono work in terms of formatting, in terms of the cover design and that. And that didn't happen, but that's fine, okay? So at that point, I said, okay, now we got to raise some money. So we had a GoFundMe, and we used that to raise money. At the same time, the Calma Executive Board was still moving forward with the nonprofit status. They were also moving forward with connecting with other organizations. We started kind of putting down the line and said, if you want to be a member of Calma, you're going to have to pay a membership due. Mm-hmm. I remember one story. We were at a meeting and somebody said, well, you know, we were talking about, you know, Calma had no money, that people should expect, if they join Calma, should expect to offer something, and at that time was, you know, a membership fee. And others says, well, you know, some people might have a hard time doing that, so perhaps there could be some in-kind contribution to Calma. And some woman, I don't mean that, kind of raised her hand and she goes, I can bring tamales. And I thought, well, that's very hard, you know, well, sure, and we certainly appreciate that. But however, unless we sell the tamales, right, it's not going to help us much with the anthology. Yeah. So, but Calma managed to get some grants and get some other funding together, not just for the anthology, but for some other programs that they have. Like they've gone to Colorado Springs and done some poetry, like the seminars and that. So now we had money to move forward. I, at the same time, because I've done this before, was able to leverage some contacts, right? Because a lot of the people who came forward saying, oh, now that you're going to pay for this services, this is my rate. And I'm like, well, that's way too much money, right? Okay, being just because we're going to go forward on a professional level doesn't mean we're just going to throw money away. Okay. So all that started to come together, and it finally we hired a copyright editor. The content editing I left that up to my editors. They would look through the poems and come back. They would look through the essays. They would look through the fiction and have some issues. I mean, not some issues, but they would come back with some questions. You know, of course, they look at things like typos and that, but they would say, oh, you know, the story here, I think you could strengthen it a little bit more, or these lines in your poem could be strengthened if you change some words around. And I'm not a poet, so I don't. It all looks good to me, right? Mm-hmm. But my poetry editor would say, well, I think this would work better if you did it this way, and I would trust her because she has a lot of experience as in poetry, and it was Anita Jepson Gilbert.
Yes.
Who was our poetry editor. Our essay and nonfiction editor was Amy Medina Carr, who's in California, but still a member of Calma. And then we had Kim Sanchez. And then for a while, we also had Cristina Montoya, who was very helpful in helping us set up the GoFundMe and in making contacts with getting finding the format designers.
Wow.
So
this is a process.
Yeah, it's quite a process. I quit tracking all the time I was spending on it, on this, and then finally all putting it together. And finally, I think in May we started. I set up accounts on the anthology is available from two venues. One is for Amazon, and there to publish a book you have Kindle direct publishing. That's one. And then the other one is Ingram Spark that you have. And the differences between the two is Amazon is a little bit cheaper, but the Ingram Spark has richer colors, nicer colors on it. And another thing is a lot of institutions won't order from Amazon, but they will order from Ingram Spark. So we wanted to have those particular venues available. So now I have a bunch of orders coming in, and at my house I've got boxes and boxes of the anthology.
Wow! And
we have the official book launch is Saturday, June 29th at the Lakewood United Methodist Church in Lakewood, and from 2 to 4. And I'd certainly like to see everybody. And we'll have copies of the book for sale, and we will have the contributors reading from their work and doing a Q&A. So it'll be a great opportunity for everybody to really share with us finally getting this thing published. I mean, it's taken 2 years, but honestly that's about right for an anthology, about 2 years to get it from start to stop. So here it is.
You know, I got to say that, you know, I am one of the contributors. I'm so honored and excited to be one of the contributors to this amazing work. And I remember Anita would send me an email and she'd say, you know, this is the poem that you wrote, and you know, this is exactly what you said. You know, if this would flow a little bit better if you do this. And I'm like, yeah, it makes sense, you know. And so it was really helpful in making, you know, just everything just was so smooth and everything was so seamless. You know, from the outside perspective, I imagine it was pretty treacherous for you guys.
Well, there's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, a lot of moving parts.
There's 47 stories, 23 contributors. One of the contributors who I need to mention, if you look at the cover here, is the image of the tree. This came from Esteban Lucero, who is a late local author.
Up so you can see that.
Yeah, you can see that tree with the sunrise behind it. Esteban was known in the circles as the Guajiro artist, the shaman artist.
Really?
And I and unfortunately he passed away. I'm going to say 3 years ago, which was a loss to the community. He combines pre-Columbian, Aztec, Chicano, very Catholic Christian, and metaphysical components in his artwork, and he makes it work.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that is really a good looking cover.
Yeah, Well, the actual cover beyond that came from the leaves that you have, and then the type for the font for Ramos and Raíces. That was from the cover designer, my friend Catherine Renta. I contacted her and I said, hey, I kind of have this idea. You run for it. I had this certain idea, and she comes back to me and she says, it doesn't work. That doesn't work. Let me do it my way. So I go, sure. And she came up with this beautiful cover. You look at this cover and it says Latino, I think, with the colors. It just
very much
jumps out. Even though they're leaves, they kind of actually look like chili peppers.
They do. They really do.
They are leaves on it, and that was kind of her intent right there. So in effect, it's a very kind of to me a very Chicano way of looking at it, in that you see one thing, but it can also mean something else.
Yes, it's almost magical. I mean, when I saw the cover on Facebook, I mean it. I jumped within myself, because it's like, look at this representation. Look at the competency. Look at the beauty. Look at the pride, the history. I mean, everything. It's all right here. I love that. You know, the cover just really is very all-encompassing in that it just expresses so many different, like you say, perspectives of life itself.
So, I just have to mention a couple of things. First of all, I was just the guy who put this all together. You know, I had, there's a common saying: you never want to be the smartest guy in the room. You want to surround yourself with smart people, and all that worked out with me. Both my editors, both with the Calma board, Karen Gonzalez in particular would always be like, Mario, what about this? What about that? Oh yeah, okay, I'll get to that. Oh, what about this? So it was always good, always making sure that all the loose threads were being taken care of. So I appreciate what she had done there. Something else, when I was putting this together, being the chief, the jefe editor, it's my prerogative to write a note or something, right, on this, which I did. It's the introduction, to write the introduction. So I had some things in mind that I wanted to cover, and then Frank Davila, in one of his essays, said everything I wanted to say. So I'm saying, he said, oh my God, you stole all my thunder. So I had to go back and I had to rethink what I wanted to say in my introduction, because I didn't want to repeat the same things. But he did such a great job in saying that. And we're talking about metaphysical. One poem that to me was very, very metaphysical came from Juliana Aragon Fatula, and the word is Koyo Huaki and the Star Gods. And she had sent in a couple of memoir essays, and then included this poem, which to me is very concise, a very compact poem, but very, very metaphysical, and one that I really enjoy reading on that. Like I said,
Would you like to read it?
I'm going to wait and let for her read it, because I'm sure she can do a better spin on it than I can.
Okay.
So but it was buy the book. Buy the book. You can pre-order the book on Amazon right now, but it's the ebook. Amazon will not let me, or I don't know who else, but let us offer the hard copy on pre-order. They won't let us do that. So you can pre-order the ebook if you want. Put it on your Kindle or your other reader. I think it's $3.99. So it's a good. That way you can take it with you. But like I said, on Amazon and then on Ingram Spark, it will be available to the public on the 29th of this month.
Oh, very good.
Yes.
So it's so important, guys. I mean, remember, your roots of a tree, though we don't see them, are always there. And finding out about, I know I don't want to sound like an infomercial, but understanding these perspectives is it's so connecting. I think, I'm so excited to get down, to start reading this. I'm going to pick up my grandson after I leave here from New Mexico, and he's going to be with me for till next week. And so I'm going to be reading to him. He's going to be entertained, because I know there's some wonderful stories in here, and having the opportunity to meet some of these authors even makes it even more special for me. So when you as you were putting this together, I'm sure you had a lot of points where you said, did you ever throw up your hand and say, it's done, I can't do it, or I'm so frustrated, or?
No, I didn't, because I knew that the organization was depending on me pull this through. When we really ran into the point where we didn't have any money, and I know some people were really excited because I put out originally since September last year that was our goal to publish it by then, and when that didn't happen, I'm sure people said, well, here they go, here's another a bunch of Latinos getting together doing something and not following through, and I did not want that to happen. I was on a Zoom call with somebody, and we were talking about the anthology, and then she said, well, what if the anthology happens? And I immediately corrected her. No, it is when the anthology is happening, and here it is. Okay,
here it is.
So, but like I said, it was a group effort, and I had a lot of people were working with me to make sure this got done, and I'm very grateful.
Yes, I think it is. It's wonderful. It's validating. It's inspiring. I've said this on the station before. I'm just going to say it. When my ancestors went to bed one night, it was Mexico, and they woke up, it was America. And the people that were Mexican said, "You're no longer Mexican," and the Americans said, "You're not American."
Yeah.
And so we were basically, in Walsenburg, Colorado, what's, used to be the Plaza de Leon before that, but we were a people without a country. But if you go out into society and you go behind closed doors and the white people call me a Mexican, and I go behind closed doors and the Mexicans call me a gringo. And so, you know what? I'm here, sorry. And if you don't like it, that's too bad, because I am who I am, and I'm proud of that. And I embrace that, and you should embrace that too. And, like Mario said earlier, the Chicano Latino people have been marginalized, historically, and to some degree it continues, but we are coming of age, not only in our numbers, not only in our education. I don't know of what college it was in California, but they showed the Chicano Latino graduates of the college, and it was endless Chicano, Latino people walking, Latinx people walking by this camera. And it was just so, for me, it was heartwarming, and it was encouraging, because we're not on the wayside anymore. We're in mainstream. I got a daughter that works for the U.S. government, and she's a GS-15, if you know what that is, and she's only 36 years old. And you know what? That's who we are. We're the guys that should be at the board, sitting at the board members' meetings, and we're the ones that are, we shouldn't be just the bus drivers and the janitors. We have so much more in us and so much more potential, and exploring your creative abilities is exactly is a wonderful place to matriculate. It's a wonderful place to find yourself, to bathe, to bask, to appreciate, and to grow. They say a person who won't read is any better than a person who can't read. And I've also heard that if you read 2 books a year, you read more books than 99% of the public. And it's like, geez, that's not encouraging. All right, I got off track there, but really, raíces is such an important word. It's such a valuable word, and it's something that really makes connection to our ancestry and to our roots and to our history and to our, the things that have made us who we are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the issue here for Chicanos in Colorado or northern New Mexico is exactly what you said, in that it was, this part of the U.S. was one time called Alta Mexico, right? And then it was, people pretty much say it was stolen during the U.S. Mexican-American War of 1847, and the boundaries shifted, and because of manifest destiny, okay, because there was this idea of the Yankee, I guess, imperialism to go from sea to shining sea. Okay, and I remember that. Mm-hmm. I remember that from school, and so that pretty much almost all the western half of the United States west of the Mississippi was in the way. Okay, so that was that part of that land grab. But there's a little bit more of that. For example, my family, immigrated here in the United States. We came as mojados, wetbacks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In southern, we grew up in southern New Mexico, and it's kind of a different kind of attitude to me because they were all very transient, right? It was very. If you go to northern New Mexico, you will find people who've been there for 500 years.
Oh yeah.
Right, 500 years. You go to southern New Mexico, now everybody is 1 or 2 generations, if that, and then they move on. Like my family, for example, you know, you go there and then you cross the border, you go to school. I went to New Mexico State, and then after that, you go somewhere else. So there's a very transient nature of that. But then you had the los braceros, the immigrant workers, who came with the farm workers and that. Well, you know, they weren't here, and then now of course we have the Venezolanos who come over, and they have no idea.
Wow.
Of this used to be part of Mexico, right? And none of that. It doesn't register with them at all because their experience is completely different. They came here from South America, just recently arrived here.
Well, Estados Unidos, no más.
Yeah, Estados Unidos. That's all they know. They know that there are some people here who speak.
Wow.
And she was a rocket scientist, and I went to graduate from Stanford. One of the first, I think, might have been the first Latina engineer to graduate from Stanford.
Wow.
And she's currently on the board of Qualcomm, on the executive board of directors for Qualcomm. Yeah, so
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
man.
she's up there. She's served on several federal or White House commissions on for Latino education or Hispanic education on that. So very, very well has her pulse, a thumb on the pulse of national politics and national business on that. So I love talking to her and listening to her talk about those things. What she can say, but that's just an example of that. Of how we, I think that we as Latinos have to be a little bit, I think forceful. The way we I don't mean forceful as aggressive in that, but I think we have to recognize our potential, both as a group, as an individuals, and push forward on that.
There's so much cultural, I don't know if the word is humility. You know, I remember when I was a diversity instructor, we used to talk about, in Japan, they said the nail that sticks up gets pounded down.
Right.
So you don't make any, but in the United States, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Correct.
And so, in our culture, in the culture of the United States, it's more of, hey, look at me, I'm here. And we've always been, I don't know if conditioned or what the term would be, but we've always had some kind of, our parents would say, hey, don't get down, don't make so much noise, don't draw too much attention to yourself. Is that, do you?
Well, yeah, and something that came up to me, I was listening, is that Mexicanos especially, not all of them, but like all of them that are my family and stuff, it's very interesting. You say, when you would talk to somebody, and instead of, you would say, excuse me, you would say, mande. Like, mándame. In other words, order me. Okay? And if you listen to, for example, in Spain, they never say that. They would say, perdón, right? Excuse me. Okay? And there has to, and I thought, why is that? Well, for me, I think it came about because I would speak Spanish with my elders, right? Pretty much exclusively. I very seldom spoke Spanish with my friends. It was just with my elders. So when elders would speak to me, and I didn't understand, and instead of in Spanish I wouldn't say excuse me, I would say mande, short for mándame, send me around. So my sister would tell me she would go to South America representing the big American companies, and she's talking to them, and she would say, first of all, she's the short Latina, right? You look at her, you can tell that she's a Chicana, right? So you have these guys in like South America and Argentina, for example, or Colombia, or even Mexico, right? It's also, there's a lot of racism there as well, and a lot of stratification. So big surprise, the tall blonde people are sitting at these boards and stuff. And here comes my sister representing these companies, American companies, the boss company, and there's this short Latina coming, and then they're talking to her, and then she would say, and instead of, she would understand, and she would say something, excuse me, but she would say, mándame. And they were like, this is what a servant says to them. Right? And they were getting really confused by that as to why somebody representing this big American company is talking like a servant.
Wow.
But you, as like a Mexicano or a Chicano, don't understand.
It's a cultural acceptance where it's taboo there.
Yeah, it would be very taboo. It would be self-marginalizing.
Self-marginalizing.
To say something like that, right? So I'm not saying we should never say mande. In fact, we should probably embrace the fact that, hey, we are used to taking
servant leader. It's like a servant leader.
We're used to serving a leader, but at the same time, we're also used to getting things done.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Absolutely.
And I think that's another thing. I think Mexicanos or Chicanos, one thing that we can pride ourselves on is that we are very hard workers.
No one can deny that. I mean, no one can deny that.
Yeah. They're very.
You want a job done, man? Hire a Mexicano.
Hire a Mexicano.
Absolutely. If it's concrete, techero, whatever, pisos, wood paint, pintura, whatever you want.
Right. And that we just have to expand what people expect of us in that regard into other fields, like in the publishing field, in the educational field, in the medical field, and particularly in the business
engineering
field.
And cybersecurity
and science and all that.
Yes, science. Yes.
So we just need to move forward into that, so that just as being Mexicano, being Chicano is synonymous with this hard-working laborer, it's also synonymous who get things done right. We should also be synonymous with the white-collar professional who gets things done.
Absolutely. Instead of the highest population of incarcerated people,
Yeah.
That's another show.
Yeah, that's something else.
There's a lot of dynamics involved in that, and it's not. As I've learned, I've realized that that's not an accidental thing. Is the high population of incarcerated people who are people of color. I might be labeled for this, but I think it's by design. It wasn't an accident. I mean, if you look historically about the first private prisons, and again, I'm getting off track again, but when you look at those first private prisons, there was some intention behind that, because at the same time they changed the laws to really reflect very poorly on people of color, and at that time they right now we have either 149 or 159 private owned prisons. Slavery is alive and well in this country.
Right.
But again, we're forgive me.
Yeah, sure. I can because we do cover some of those themes in Dramas and Rays.
Yes, I believe that there's going to be some really
there are some themes that cover that. It's not just immigrants. It's not just the obreros or the farm workers. I mean, it's a story, very powerful story, but there's some other stories, other shared experiences, if you will, about other things that not necessarily the contributors have themselves done, but that they're aware of. Okay?
Yes.
So this anthology, I think, to me is very wide in the scope of the kind of themes that it looks at, but at the same time, some of them dive very deep into what they explore.
Yes.
Okay, so it's not just very superficial skimming on things. It's a very deep dive, if you will, into these other places.
Hence the raíces.
Hence the raíces. Exactly. For example, in one of the stories, Amy Medina Carr, who was one of the editors, also has contributed some stories, and one of them are personal memoirs. And in her memoir, she does talk about a lot of things about the Chicano experience, and some of it beyond what she experienced directly. But she's very aware that it was happening, and also that her life in itself was an experience, was a metaphor for Chicanos, Chicanas, and the growth of feminism in the United States. So that very, very good stories. Now again, I don't want to. I'm sharing some names, and I don't want anybody to get the impression that these are my favorites, that these are better than the other ones. I mean, there's just so many works.
Yes. You know, I'm glancing through here, and I just came across, you know, Beatriz Montoya, who I
Right.
just love. I just love Beatriz. She's you know, she wrote her memoirs, but she, you know, she has her poem My Last Dance.
Right.
You know, I won't be dancing anymore. They've rolled back the carpet on the dance floor. Musicians have gone to their mazes, putting their instruments away in their cases to gather the dust of the spidery threads of entrapment. Tangerine, Perfidia, and Laura. Wrap your arms around your lover. Bend your bodies in a romantic sway before you put your dancing shoes away. Maria Elena, remember the many hours he held you, whispering sweet nothings. Savor the night of enchantment in the arms of your mate. Sing adios to the music and reconcile to your heartbreaking fate. Adios, lindo mío.
That's a very poignant poem. One of my copy editor is this, get her name here. Victoria Hanley, obviously not a Chicano, but had a very good reputation, and I kind of wanted somebody outside of our experience, right? You want to get outside the bubble.
Mm-hmm.
So I had her. I sent her the stories, and when she would make her copy edits, and then she would come back with a little short 1 or 2, maybe 3-line impression of the story, and she'd come back and this, for her, this was also something different. You know, she had never thought about, you know, potato harvesting, right? She never thought about people looking at their being seen as outsider within their own country, right? And some was an experience outside of her that she had.
Very revealing for her.
Very revealing for her, and she said she was impressed by the stories and the honesty and the I don't want to say vulnerability, but the willingness to share this, which is to her normally not shared with other people. So that was I was very encouraged that, because that was the first opportunity for these stories to get outside of Kama itself, and then have somebody come back and say, "Wow, this is really good.
This is good stuff." Yeah,
Good
there's
stuff." Yes.
Yeah. You know, I might be making a broad judgment here, but it seems to me that a lot of times when I read the works of Latino Chicano authors, that there's so much emotion, there's so much poured out in it that makes it so powerful or so unique in its own way. And I don't know if it's just because I'm connected to it, or because I really do see this passion that I don't see in a lot of other authors and writers. And maybe I'm biased again, you know, but you know, I just love to feel like when I read Manuel Ramos' works, you know, I mean, you could just almost hear the music in the background, you know,
Right.
or you know, I mean, I read books of, you know, of different authors, and I just feel almost as if they're not just pouring out their story, but they're pouring out their real emotions with the story. I don't know, maybe it's just me.
Wow.
I'm biased.
Yeah, you're biased. I like to think I read a lot, and there are a lot of writers who are not Latinos who are able to project emotions out there, do it in different ways. So I'm always reading them and learning how that is done. I think what makes literature so valuable is it is the shared human experience, right? And that you can read, you know, you could read a poem by a Vietnamese person,
That could bring you to tears.
and that could bring you to tears over whatever. And what brings you to tears is the fact that you understand what they are doing. Okay?
Makes sense.
Or an African, or and you know, somebody, you know, from England, right?
You know, we've talked a lot about the Ramas Raíces, and we haven't had a chance to even talk about any of your books. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to have you back on on the show and talk about some of your works. You know, because I think it's definitely worthy of, you know, of having you. You know, I want to feature your works, man, because I mean, when you